Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Mile Higher Podcast. This is episode 210. And if you're watching, you can see that I am all alone up here. Kendall is not here today. She had full intentions on being on this episode, but you know, pregnancy, man. In the third trimester, she's only weeks away from giving birth. It's getting a lot harder to record, and her blood pressure has been a little bit elevated. I mean, nothing to be really concerned about yet, but we just wanted to, give her some time to rest and start preparing for birth, because that's going to be a very big deal. And honestly, I'm still trying to get myself prepared for birth because I feel like it's going to hit me like a freight train the day that my daughter comes. So she is not joining me today, and Janelle is actually out today as well. She's working on some other projects right now. So I have Karelly stepping in, who actually works behind the scenes for Mile Higher. She's one of our editors. She also is producer and on the sesh, if you watch that podcast. So thank you, Karelly, for stepping in today.
Of course.
So I'm not truly alone here. But yeah, this is the first time I think I've done an episode without Kendall, actually.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be fun.
Things are happening here at Mile Higher headquarters. I will probably be gone for at least 2 weeks. Kendall will probably be gone quite a bit longer than that. But the hope and goal is to only go on break from the show for 2 weeks or so. And then I will probably come back and do a few more episodes just solo for Mile Higher, so that we can just give Kendall time to heal and take care of baby and come back when she's ready. But I just wanted to let you know that, so that you're not surprised if you don't hear Kendall's voice for a while. But with all that being said, we are going to be covering the Harp conspiracy theory today, and really just talking about the idea of what weather manipulation, could potentially this Harp technology be used to control our minds. And this is one of those conspiracy theories that has been out there for a long time. And gosh, I think a couple of years ago, if you didn't know, I had my own YouTube channel. I tried to kind of mimic Kendall and her YouTube channel, and actually made a video about the Haarp program and conspiracy theory. And this was a few years ago. And since then, there's been some updates with that. And a lot of people out there believe that the Harp conspiracy has been debunked, which that'll be up for you to decide at the end of the episode. I have my own thoughts and feelings about it. Before we get into the episode, though, the last thing I wanted to mention is that Mile Higher merch has been a huge success. So thank you to everybody out there who supported the show and Mile Higher Media in general by going out and buying some merch. We really do appreciate it. Again, this is a small family-owned and operated operation here. So every single order does go directly back into the business and supporting not only Kendall and myself, but all of our other employees and just the business as a whole. So we really do appreciate it. And we're still working as fast as we can to get the rest of those orders out. But if you haven't checked out the latest collection, it's milehighermerch.com. You can buy merch for Lights Out, Mile Higher, the Sesh, as well as Kendall Ray's collection. But yeah, check out milehighermerch.com if you haven't already. Also, this episode of the podcast is brought to you by Tushy Stamps and Pretty Litter. But let's just go ahead and jump right into the episode. We've got quite a bit to cover. And I just want to start off by saying that it's really weird how, we're in weird times as it is and just things happening daily. But just in the last couple of days of recording this, so I'm recording this on July 6th. So July 5th, the Large Hadron Collider at Cern, if you remember that episode, we did a whole deep dive on Cern and the conspiracy sort of surrounding that organization a year or two ago. And if you're not aware, there is this gigantic, it's called the Large Hadron Collider, but it generates an extreme amount of energy to the point where this thing could create micro black holes. The amount of energy this thing can produce is just truly out of this world. And it's only been turned on twice up until yesterday. And yesterday they turned it back on for a third round. And basically they smash protons together and molecules and whatever together, and they try to create and discover new particles. And they did. They discovered 3 subatomic particles, which I'm not even trying to explain subatomic particles right now, but it's really crazy what they're doing at Cern. And there's a lot of people that believe that Cern is responsible for some of the Mandela effects that we all have noticed over the years, and perhaps they're transitioning us to another timeline or something like that, or a parallel universe. And the fact that they turned it on yesterday, I'm just like, oh man, we'll have to wait and see see what new Mandela effects.
I was going to
come
say,
out of that.
what do you think is going to come out? Maybe some like new serial Mandela effects.
Just watch.
Yeah, right.
There's going to be something, I swear. And it's just crazy what we're doing at this point in history and with technology. And so when we're talking about HARP, then the HARP technology and sort of basically HARP is this technology that's been created to be a radio frequency oscillator. So it's got the ability to pump out radio signals at high frequencies and just reach heights that we never could before. And I'll go into more depth here in a second, but I also wanted to mention before we get into HARP, the Georgia Guidestones were blown up, which if you're not familiar with the Georgia Guidestones are these stone tablets almost, but they're tall. I would say they're like 12 feet tall. And somebody blew them up because I'm assuming it's probably related to the conspiracy because they reference the New World Order. There's also some other really weird messages and writing on it. So a lot of conspiracy theorists really wonder what those are for and, what they symbolize. And apparently somebody blew them up yesterday. So I just wanted to share those little news stories because I just was like blown away. I was like, wow, all of this is just happening within days. We got Georgia Guidestones. We got the Large Hadron Collider being turned on. Crazy times that we're in. But if you're interested in learning more about the Georgia Guidestones, again, we have an episode where we go into quite a bit of depth with that topic because there is a lot more to the Georgia Guidestones. And when you learn about them more, you can see more reasons why somebody would want to blow them up per se. So kind of crazy. But let's go ahead and jump right into the Haarp program. So in 1990, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program began, which this is HAARP, HAARP. And originally it was an ionospheric research facility for the U.S. military. So basically a program put into place to study the upper part of the Earth's atmosphere. And that portion, like I just said, is known as the ionosphere. And the ionosphere is where solar radiation ionizes atoms and molecules, creating a layer of electrons. Radio waves from Earth are modified and reflected in the ionosphere, and this allows us to use many important forms of navigation and communication. For example, a signal from your phone is basically sent up to the ionosphere and reflected back down to a cell tower on Earth. The ionosphere is also where auroras, or the northern lights, are formed. When solar winds speed up, they disturb and ionize charged particles in the magnetosphere, and these charged particles move around and collide with other particles. In other words, they get very excited, and those excited parts of the atmosphere give off light, and that light creates those famously beautiful aurora borealis, which I hope to one day see. And sometimes you can actually hear the auroras. The sound is faint, but some people report that it's a noise like crackling or static, dogs barking, whooshing, or glass hitting glass. Researchers were actually able to pick up aurora radio waves and turn them into sound. And there's actually a clip here.
So when you see aurora, again, very low frequency receivers can turn the sound, turn those signals to sound. So this is the sound of aurorae here on Earth.
Who knew that the aurora radio waves make sound like that? And it sounds like Transformers talking, if you ask me, but very, very weird. And I think one of the reasons why the ionosphere was, they really wanted to figure out a way to study it. And they were worried that basically, because this is where so much of our navigation and communication happens on Earth, that what if an enemy of the United States decided to send missiles up there and create explosions in the ionosphere? How would that affect navigation and communication here back on Earth? It'd be devastating. So there's obviously a common interest, not just with the United States, but all around the world, to sort of study the effects of these radio frequencies and just energy in the ionospheres. So according to HAARP, their mission has always been to understand and use the ionosphere to enhance communication and surveillance systems for civilian and defense purposes. The facility is based in Gakona, Alaska, and the small town is about 200 miles from Anchorage and about 234 miles to Fairbanks. So Harp is pretty much in the middle of nowhere. Construction on the Harp facility began in 1993, and that was after a Republican senator from Alaska named Ted Stevens campaigned to have the project approved by the U.S. government. And at the time, the U.S. was shutting down a bunch of old military radar sites used to detect Soviet bombers. I mean, Alaska is super close to Russia or then the Soviet Union, so that makes sense. But one of those sites was in Gakona, and there was also a push for the U.S. military to start studying and using ELF waves. ELF waves, or extremely low frequency waves, could be used for submarine communications. Ted Stevens saw an opportunity to convince the government to use the Gakona site for this research, and scientists would be able to use the facilities for ionospheric heating, and the military would keep the site open. That way, Ted Stevens could keep money flowing into the state of Alaska. The program was jointly funded by the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Navy, the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and of course, DARPA, which is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. But the project was going to be expensive, and that way they could actually justify the high cost of running HARP. At one point, Ted said that HARP could take energy down from Aurora Borealis and use it on Earth, which would solve the world's energy crisis. This wasn't possible, and a lot of physicists made fun of this claim. But there was also the case of a HARP consultant who took out a bunch of patents. A man by the name Bernard Eastland, or Ben Eastland, consulted for one of the firms building HARP, and he got a bunch of patents for some weird things that he thought the HARP technology could do. He said that they'd be able to use their technology to turn natural gas into microwaves, and that would somehow create a giant shield against Soviet bombs. But the idea was pretty quickly dismissed by defense groups as nonsense. Here's a little clip of some HARP officials explaining how the conspiracy theories with their facility started.
HARP was built, or even started to be built. His name was Bernard Eastland. And Bernard had some ideas, and that's what a lot of engineers and scientists do. If you've got an idea, boy, it sounds good, first thing you do is get a patent, right? So Bernard got those patents for mind control, weather modification, power beaming, right? So he went and got all these patents out there, and nobody read that or cared about that, right? Until this facility was starting to be built. The first story came out in Popular Mechanics, and I think it was in 1992. And they showed, a HARP facility blowing up a Volkswagen 200 miles away. So they had all this conspiracy stuff in that early one. So there really wasn't much out there, but as we went through 3 different build-outs to get to where we are now, it garnered more media attention, it just had more attention, so it all went back to Bernard's patents, right? Oh, they're doing mind control, blowing up space shuttles, causing tsunamis, so all this stuff. And on our hotlines, we have gotten phone calls like you would not believe. Thankfully, the last one I got was a young lady asking if I could help her to win the lottery. So I'm like, hey.
So that's pretty much how anybody from HARP would respond to that question of how did the conspiracy theory start? And it's interesting that it does all go back to this one guy, Bernard Eastland. And he did, in fact, take out these patents to, potentially use the HARP technology for all these other things, weather modification, mind control, and other things. And we'll dive into a little bit more of that here in a bit. So in actuality, a lot of HARP's research involved studying how disturbances in the ionosphere caused by solar winds disrupt GPS communications, and the Department of Defense became involved with the project because they had those interests too. They wanted to see how they could improve their existing GPS systems. But obviously there was a lot of speculation flying around about what HARP would actually be used for. People thought that HARP was being constructed as some sort of secret defense project, but again, we'll get into more of that in a bit. So the groups funding HARP constructed 180 72-foot tall antennas spread across a 33-acre patch of land. The IRI, or Ionospheric Research Instrument, aka the field of antennas, wasn't completed until 2007. 33 acres though, what does that sound like? Freemasons? Kind of weird. But each antenna was equipped to beam up a radio signal into the ionosphere. And these antennas can transmit up to 3.6 megawatts of a high-frequency signal anywhere in the 2.8 to 10 megahertz range. And those signals are transmitted 40 to 300 miles up into the ionosphere. So very, very high. The powerful radio waves temporarily excite or disrupt sections of the ionosphere in these experiments. The heat from the high-frequency radio waves pushes up on the ionospheric layer, and the radio waves basically punch a hole through it. So Harp is playing around with the ionosphere to see how it reacts. Well, maybe it could react badly. According to Harp, they claim that these disruptions that they create in the ionosphere are pretty temporary. And it's also a pretty unstable layer of the atmosphere, so it's constantly changing as it is thanks to the sun. They also say that the effects of their experiments disappear completely in as little as a few seconds to 10 minutes. They say it's like dropping a small rock in a fast-moving stream, and the ripples caused by the stone disappear pretty quickly. The antennas are powered by 30 trailers with 6 pairs of transmitters in each, and those trailers transmit energy to the antennas, and they act as sort of control centers. There is also a main power plant that houses locomotive-sized engines, and these engines feed power into the trailers, which supply that energy to the antennas. And then those antennas beam out a radio wave signal. In 2014, the US government announced that it was going to be shutting Harp down, and DARPA was set to finish up its last project at the facilities that June. And the US Air Force said that once DARPA stopped needing Harp's facilities, there wouldn't be anyone paying to use them anymore. So they were going to shut it all down. And the Air Force planned on clearing out any useful technology there by that winter. There were some people in the government and the scientific community that were really disappointed by that decision. Harp was the world's most advanced ionospheric research program, but many people at the Pentagon said that there just wasn't enough money to keep Harp open. But Harp was saved in 2015 when the University of Alaska Fairbanks took it over, and now they're the only group managing it. The project is funded by researchers from all over the globe, and there's actually 3 other facilities that are similar to Harp in the world, and they're located in Norway, Puerto Rico, and Russia. But Harp is the most powerful and advanced version of this type of facility. They actually rent out the facilities for research at a rate of $5,000 an hour. Harp scientists have a high interest in transparency, because obviously they don't like the conspiracy theorists throwing all these accusations at them. And so as a result of this, they publish their research very often and all of their environmental impact plans. And according to Harp, they've always been as transparent as possible since they were first built and opened, which again, different group running Harp than there was back in the day. This was run by DARPA and a bunch of other military projects. So, it's really hard to say what was going on during that time. But they say now too that there has never been any top secret or classified research at Harp, and it's been all basic research, basic physics, trying to see how the ionosphere works. So with that being said, how top secret is Harp? Apparently it's not, and it never was, according to them. Their website says Harp is not classified, and at one point it said that there are no classified documents pertaining to Harp. In 2007, the website stated the program was not classified. There's a 1993 environmental impact study on Harp that has always been public record, but some places incorrectly report it as declassified. No security clearance is required to visit and tour the facilities, plus their address was publicly available on Harp's own website since the IRI was completed in 2007. So they say that there's no classified tests or research, but isn't classified research just that a secret? And that's what I have to say, is that just because they tell you that it's never been done before, that doesn't mean that that's necessarily true. I mean, you can take their word for it if you want, but again, there's been multiple military factions involved with this facility, and they're not going to ever tell the public exactly what they were doing. I mean, that's why it's top secret in the first place. But again, there's always a possibility that they are telling the truth, and this has all just been a harmless experiment. Ultimately, their goal is to obviously make people understand what they're doing and what the project's all about, because as much as they want to, they know the conspiracy theories will likely never go away. Harp doesn't have enough staff to give regular tours of the facility, but starting in 1995, Harp had a yearly open houses where guests could come see those facilities themselves. But due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Harp hasn't been able to hold an open house since 2019, so there's no word on when you might be able to check out the facilities yourself again. And as per the Harp website, it looks like they haven't had a research campaign since June 2021, and they had no campaigns in 2020, which obvious reason there. 1 in 2019, 3 in 2018, and 2 in 2017. And their Twitter and Facebook accounts haven't been updated since 2021. But the facility is definitely expensive and remote, so they only do a few campaigns a year max, and then the scientists go home and analyze that data. The property that Harp sits on is still technically owned by the Air Force, and they're in process of changing hands, and that's why there's still military signs up around the complex. But again, it has been operated or funded by the US government since 2014, as far as we know. So that's the very, very pretty basic level overview of Harp and what they do and sort of the history behind the program and the facility. But next, we're going to dive into the conspiracy theories a little bit more, and we'll just see what you think of what they might actually be doing or had done at Harp in the past. But before we do that, we're going to take a quick ad break, and we'll be right back. We all have that one friend who, when you ask how they're doing, they always say that they're fine. It's kind of the same with my cats. They seem fine, and since I don't speak cat, I just kind of go with it. I should say I used to go with it. I wanted a little bit more peace of mind, and that's why I switched to Pretty Litter, which is the world's smartest cat litter. It can even do calculus. No, not really. But Pretty Litter crystals change color to detect early signs of potential illness like metabolic acidosis, which can cause diabetes, urinary tract infections, kidney issues, and more. Pretty Litter is ultra absorbent and instantly traps odor. It's lightweight, dust-free, and works for up to a month without clumping. That means no more wasting litter. Plus, Pretty Litter ships free to my door in a small, lightweight bag, and I never run out. I don't have a massive container of litter taking up space, and I don't have to lug that bulky container from a store to my car and into my house. I've been using Pretty Litter for a while now and actually use it in my automatic litter boxes that kind of have like a little rake that rakes up the poop, puts it away in the little container. And I got to say, it keeps the boxes smelling so much fresher for so much longer than even the other crystal litter that I've used out there before. But best of all, obviously, is the health indicator. I mean, that's such a huge piece of information that you wouldn't otherwise get. And so far, haven't had any issues. But if that were to change, I know that I could trust my Pretty Litter to let me know when something's going on so I can get my cats to the vet before things get really bad. So once you try Pretty Litter, it'll be the only litter you ever use. Go to prettylitter.com/milehigher to save 20% off on your first order. That's prettylitter.com/milehigher to save 20% on your first order. Again, that's prettylitter.com/milehigher. Isn't it crazy that in 2022, we have high-speed internet, celebrities going to space, and electric cars, and yet people are still cleaning their butts the way our Victorian brothers and sisters did, with toilet paper? Step into the 21st century and upgrade your bathroom routine and start washing your bum with Hello Tushy bidets. Because smearing your business around with toilet paper is so 100 years ago. I gotta say, I love the Tushy bidet. Recently, I've been on a colon cleanse, and if you've ever done one of those before, you know how rough it can be sometimes in the bathroom. And so whenever you're done, I absolutely love to squirt my butt with that cool water all up in there, get it all nice and clean. It also just feels really good afterwards. I don't know why, but the Tushy bidet is absolutely amazing. We have two of them in our house. We have one upstairs and one downstairs, and I can't imagine life without it anymore. Plus, it saves you money on toilet paper, and it's better for the environment. The Hello Tushy bidet attachment washes your bum with fresh water for a way better clean than toilet paper. You simply spray and pat dry. It attaches to your existing toilet. No electrician or plumber needed, and installs in less than 8 minutes. It cuts down your TP use by 80%, saving money and paper waste. So make the restroom your best room with the complete Tushy system. In addition to the Tushy bidet attachment, they have ottoman, toilet brush. They have a bunch of other bathroom accessories as well. Hello Tushy has cleaned over 1 million happy bums. Join them and take care of your business the cleaner way. We want all of our listeners to have clean bums, so visit hellotushy.com/milehigher to get 10% off plus free shipping right now. That's hellotushy.com/milehigher for 10% off. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and get into some of the conspiracy theories surrounding Harp and the facilities. And these have been going on for decades now, honestly. And the program has tried their best to debunk those theories, but they're still very, very popular. I mean, we're covering it. But here's a clip of one of the Harp workers reacting to some threats that they've actually gotten from people.
Being the focus of endless conspiracy theories has had a profound effect on Harp employees, who routinely field death threats.
You guys are killing the planet. It's fucking 80 degrees here in Colorado in February. This is bullshit. You guys need to shut that place down, man.
There are people who think all kinds of crazy things about what Harp can do, and they sometimes call me.
I'm going to drag all of you down. I'm going to murder, rape, dismember, cannibalize. I can't be stopped.
When you hear something like that, what's the sort of plan of action there? I mean, you take that stuff seriously, don't you?
Yeah, sure, we do. I mean, we've blocked phone numbers, but they find other ways to call. Yeah, it's kind of upsetting to get that kind of thing at 5 o'clock in the morning.
the threats went from being relatively harmless of, stop making it so hot here in Colorado in February, which, I think it's been 80 degrees in February for quite a while here in Colorado sometimes, but it went from that to death threats. And obviously, nobody should ever be threatening anybody's lives, especially over something like this. But let's talk about the weather modification theory for a second here, because this is one of the most popular theories. And clearly people believe that the Haarp facility has the capability to manipulate the weather, to apparently make it warmer in certain states. But let's see if there's any validity to any of that. So weather manipulation can take on many different types of forms, actually. One form could be changing or creating specific weather events, from simple rain to natural disasters like hurricanes. So if the government wanted to, they could create an earthquake or a tsunami anywhere in the world using this Harp technology. Supposedly, the US actually has participated in weather manipulation before. In fact, methods like cloud seeding are actually a pretty common form of weather manipulation that's used all over the world. During the Vietnam War, the US used cloud seeding as a military tactic. Plane seeded clouds to make the monsoon season longer over strategic locations on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And this was part of a highly classified Operation Popeye. The US Air Force wanted to disrupt the flow of military supplies to the North Vietnamese army, and instead of just bombing the trail, they used cloud-seeded rains to soften roads and cause landslides. That way those troops wouldn't be able to use those roads to transport supplies. Operation Popeye was allegedly sponsored by Henry Kissinger and the CIA, and this chemical weather modification was conducted over Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos. So how does cloud seeding work exactly? Basically, planes drop or seed substances like ice nuclei over clouds to increase precipitation, rain, or snow. And it's confirmed that the US has tried it multiple times for defense reasons. Here's a little clip of what cloud seeding looks like.
In 2017, the UAE performed 242 cloud seeding operations. The government is confident the operations are increasing the amount of rainfall, but it's difficult to gauge.
Until now, there is no way that you can measure the success rate for each individual clouds. There are no two clouds are the same, and you don't know, for example, before actually you see the cloud, is it going to rain by itself or not, and by how much?
So cloud seeding is used pretty much all over the world, and the US still uses cloud seeding to increase rain in places where there's drought, and they can also reduce the size of hail and reduce fog around airports. Here in Colorado, actually, they use cloud seeding to increase the amount of snow up in the mountains. That way ski areas have more snow to work with, and there's more water when the snow melts in the spring. So based on these things, it's very clear that the US is no stranger to weather manipulation. And so is it totally out of the realm of possibility for people to think that perhaps HAARP might have been or is a program that controls the weather for military purposes, or is being used to experiment in weather modification purposes for the military? But we'll get back to HAARP and the military here in a second. So as the conspiracy theory goes, HAARP can cause major weather events like earthquakes, tsunamis, and tornadoes in pinpointed locations anywhere in the world. Why would the government want to do this? Maybe they're trying to distract people from political scandals or something else going on, or perhaps, they're using it to try to take down another country's economy, or is it to try to depopulate the world? Who really knows? For example, some people think that a 2-mile wide tornado was created in Oklahoma in order to distract Americans from the Benghazi attack, or that Hurricane Sandy was created to make sure Obama would be reelected. Not only that, some people allege that HAARP created Hurricane Katrina in order to increase the cost of oil, and that they created earthquakes around the world to distract Americans from economic issues back at home. And then, of course, that leads us to the issue of climate change. Some conspiracy theorists think that HAARP is creating heat waves and other natural disasters that the government is calling global warming or climate change. So instead of humans causing climate change, they believe that HAARP is artificially creating this climate change or the heating of the earth. The government's alleged reason for doing this is so that they can do things like increase taxes, create fear, and launch the Green New Deal. But going back to defense theories, some people think that the US is using HAARP to interfere in other countries. In 2010, the former Venezuelan president Hugo Chavez said that the earthquake in Haiti was not a natural disaster, and he actually claimed that it was actually the result of a US test of a weapon of earthquakes, and that it could have been a result of HAARP. Some theorists have alleged that the US created the Haiti earthquake so that they could occupy the country after the disaster, basically a coup by earthquake. In 1998, the European Parliament and Alaska State Legislature held hearings about HAARP, And they said a growing number of EU citizens had environmental concerns about the project, which is interesting because there's other facilities around the world too, but nobody seems to care about those, just the US's facility. Not only that, but there are many more natural disasters that some people think HARP has been involved in. One of those is the 2011 M9 earthquake in Japan. And a few days before the earthquake, infrared emissions above the ionosphere increased significantly right above the epicenter, which means that the atmosphere heated up right before the quake. And just before the 2010 Haiti earthquake, there was a big increase in ultra-low frequency radio signals in the atmosphere. So what's the explanation for this? Well, some people think that HARP caused the quake by sending out radio waves over that spot in Japan. But scientists have said that the explanation is something that's not at all related to HARP. Instead, it's a case of lithosphere-atmosphere-ionosphere coupling mechanism, which, man, that's a mouthful. But basically, what that means is that before an earthquake, its fault is under a huge amount of stress, and that stress causes a bunch of radon to be released into the air. And since radon is naturally radioactive, it ionizes the air, which causes a lot of condensation. And the condensation process releases heat, which causes infrared emissions. And those emissions then go up into the ionosphere and affect its total electron content. So that would explain those increases, but it's definitely something weird and interesting to think about. But the other theory that we're going to look at in relation to weather modification manipulation is that HARP can cause skyquakes. Skyquakes are basically these strange, loud booming noises that people have heard coming from the sky. And these skyquakes have been reported since the 1800s all over the world. And let's listen to some of these because it's honestly really eerie to hear and can't imagine experiencing it firsthand.
It's like coming from the sky. Listen. Hear that? Dude, what is that? It's loud, huh? I don't know what it is. It's like coming. I don't know where it's coming from. What is that? You hear it?
You see anything in the sky?
No. I've been looking.
Dude, what is that?
I've been looking like I can't find nothing, dude.
How long have you been hearing it for?
Like 2 minutes. I don't know what it is.
What is it?
I have no idea.
People over there across the street.
I know.
What is that?
Sounds like a noise you'd hear in a horror movie.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It sounds like so ominous and so like a scary movie.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, some of these I'm a little skeptical on. I mean, I know some people have faked these, but there's a ton of these clips out there. So we don't actually know what causes these skyquakes, which is honestly crazy to think about. And it seems like they just come from nowhere. They're not just random thunderclaps or anything like that. They could be caused by gas escaping from the Earth's surface, volcanic eruptions, or sonic booms. So for those that don't know, sonic booms are loud booming noises that can come naturally from the Earth, or they can be human-made. So this is a plane causing a sonic boom, just so you can hear for reference. A very different sound, though. It really doesn't sound like the skyquake videos that you see on the internet. But supersonic planes can cause sonic booms when they travel faster than the speed of sound, and natural sonic booms can occur when meteors shoot through the Earth's atmosphere. There's also this phenomenon known as the coronal mass ejections, or CMEs, and they're basically solar wind equivalent of a sonic boom. And CMEs happen when the sun's corona releases huge amounts of plasma into the solar wind. And those CMEs can create an electromagnetic storm. So basically those skyquakes could be us hearing the thunder from those storms, unless HARP is actually the culprit here. Here's another skyquake noise. They definitely are all kind of similar.
Does he have like Stranger Things or something?
Yeah, it does, honestly. some loggers out in the middle of the forest hearing this. We're looking at the sky, trying to see if there's anything causing it, but there's just nothing. It's just a blue sky. That'd be really freaky, honestly, to just be like out.
And hearing something like this?
Yeah. Like, what would you would start thinking like
Something's
the end of the world's
coming.
about to happen right now.
Yeah.
It's a very like apocalyptic sound. So like I said, some people think that Harp can trigger these booming noises. If Harp has enough power to manipulate the ionosphere, then those experiments might in fact be creating these booming or mechanical sounds from the sky. When lightning strikes, it moves through the air and ionizes the air particles, and those particles crash together to create a boom. So that's where the thunder comes from. So something similar may be happening with Harp. And as the theory goes, Harp can manipulate pinpointed locations of the ionosphere, and those disturbances may create a sort of an artificial thunder or boom, or basically a skyquake. But keep in mind, these skyquakes have been reported since the 1800s, so obviously Harp couldn't be responsible for all of those unexplained noises coming from the sky. So it's possible that they're not actually coming from the IRIs. But some people thought that the hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria were more Harp projects designed to get people into FEMA camps and institute martial law, and other hurricanes across the globe were really caused by Harp, just like the Haitian earthquake. But outside of weather manipulation, some conspiracy theorists think that Harp is being used for different shady purposes. So this gets into the secret defense project theory. So Harp has been accused of having secret electromagnetic warfare capabilities for use against people, domestically and abroad. For example, it's been proposed that Harp can disrupt or destroy enemy radars or communication systems. Many people think that Harp's ELF and VLF radio waves are being used as mind control devices. Allegedly, these waves are used to cause things like mass depression, chronic fatigue syndrome, and hallucinations. And as the theory goes, the reason why the US might be using mind control with the Harp facility is in order to usher in the New World Order, or Harp is being used to weaken the population's mind so that they're more likely just susceptible to accepting this New World Order. Believers of this theory also think that Harp might be used against certain targets of the US government in order to control their minds, or it's being used on the entire population as a way to keep people in line or keep them from rising up. Like we talked about before, the US has definitely had an interest in using weather manipulation, and in 1996, a team of military officers presented the Air Force with a research paper titled Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025. And this paper was about using emerging technologies to create strategies for using weather modification for military purposes. Its goal was to make a roadmap towards the use of military weather modification by 2025. The paper didn't mention Harp, but the date the paper was published raised some eyebrows since it was only a few years after they started construction on the Harp facilities. So we can only wonder whether or not Harp was one of the emerging technologies they were referring to. Then there's the theory that Harp is a method of defense against aliens or UFOs. And some people think that Harp is being used as some sort of laser beam to wipe out UFOs or mess with their technology. Harp issues flying restrictions around the facilities while they're conducting research experiments, so basically they tell airplanes not to fly over the Harp facility. They don't want their signals messing with the plane's equipment. This would make sense, after all, they're powerful radio transmitters. Harp has also stated that its IRI can interfere with airplane electronics, so they actually have a radar system in place that detects airplanes flying near it. And when a plane shows up on that radar, Harp's radio transmissions shut off automatically. That way they can protect the planes that accidentally fly into their airspace. Speaking of airplanes, some people believe that Harp has used its radio wave technology to cause the disappearance of Malaysian flight MH370, and they think that Harp might have been affecting the plane's radar system either intentionally or unintentionally. So the pilot got lost and went off course, and just like he couldn't see his path on the radar, people on the ground couldn't track the plane either. So that could be why MH370 was lost from the ground's radars and went missing. And some people think that Harp might have been responsible for bringing down the Space Shuttle Columbia on February 1st, 2003. The Space Shuttle Columbia disaster was when 7 crew members on the shuttle lost their lives after disintegrating, re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. The official story is that a piece of foam broke off during the shuttle's launch, and that caused the shuttle to overheat, and its systems failed during the re-entry phase. But some people think that HARP is a device that could possibly destroy the electronics of an aircraft, spacecraft, or missile in the upper atmosphere. In other words, their radio waves could take down a plane or space shuttle, which all this is really terrible to even consider. And why would the US government do this? Well, according to conspiracy theorists, the US used HARP to take down the space shuttle Columbia's target practice, and maybe that's why they brought down MH372. Definitely interesting to think about. But again, there's very little evidence to support this other than just speculating that this is what the device was used for. And also, HARP officials have said that based on all of their knowledge of the facility, there wouldn't be enough energy or even the ability to do something like this. But it's something that people definitely speculate on. But next, we're going to get into a man by the name Dr. Nick Begich Jr. And you really can't talk about the HARP conspiracy theory without diving into him, as he's the major proponent of this theory, I guess. So we're going to get into more on the conspiracy theory right after this last break. When you're running a small business, every second counts, and you can't afford to waste a single moment. That's how I feel every single day. And if I had to go to the post office, I'd probably just end my life by now, honestly, because going to the post office is a huge pain. There's always a line out the door. There's never enough workers there. And, no hate to the post office, but it just seems majorly disorganized there. So that's when I turned to stamps.com a few years ago. And ever since then, my businesses and my life has been just running so much smoother. And I've been saving so much money on postage. It's honestly crazy. It could send me around the world probably at this point. So if you don't know what stamps.com is, for more than 20 years, stamps.com has been indispensable for over 1 million businesses, including mine. And they give you access to all the post office and UPS shipping services you need right from your computer. And you can get discounts you can't find anywhere else, like up to 30% off USPS rates. And get this, 86% off UPS rates, which is saving you tons and tons of money. What's great about stamps.com is that you don't need any special software. You can use a regular printer and computer. It takes minutes to get it set up, and you can be printing postage for any letter, any package, anywhere you want to send in no time. Plus, stamps.com seamlessly works with Shopify, Amazon, Etsy, eBay, and more. We use it for Higher Level Wellness, and we use it for our merch store as well. Has already saved us so much time and money. So stop wasting time and start saving money when you use stamps.com to mail and ship. Sign up with promo code MileHigher for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial, plus free postage and a digital scale. And there's no long-term commitments or contract. Just go to stamps.com and click the microphone at the top of the homepage and enter code MileHigher. That's one word. Welcome back. Let's go ahead and get into Dr. Nick Begich Jr. So Nick is probably one of the most well-known supporters of the HARP mind control theory, actually. He co-wrote the book Angels Don't Play This HARP, Advances in Tesla Technology, which is about the alleged secret military uses of the HARP facility. Ted Stevens, the senator that campaigned to have HARP approved, was convicted of corruption in 2008 and was thrown out of the public office a week later. So Ted's replacement was a Democrat named Mike Begich. And Mike's brother, Nick Begich, is actually a hardcore believer that HARP is a top secret U.S. military weapons program. Now, Nick is actually Nick Begich Jr., and his father was a former Alaskan senator. Nick Jr.'s son, Nick Begich III, is a Republican congressional candidate, and Nick III owns a significant part of Nick Jr.'s publishing company, Earth Pulse. Nick Jr. probably got his interest in mind control conspiracies after losing his father, Nick Begich Sr., who disappeared in 1972 after boarding a small plane in Alaska, and it's presumed that he and the crew died in a plane crash, and he was declared dead later that year because they never found him.
Begich's skepticism of government can be traced to his childhood.
My dad was a state senator and then later a U.S. congressman. He was actively campaigning, and this is just before Watergate. They were flying from Anchorage to Juneau on a campaign trip, small plane, and it disappeared off the radar screen. And it was the largest search in the history of the United States up to that time, and nothing was ever officially recovered. It fundamentally changed me in a way that probably nothing else could have. In fact, I consider it the most positive event in my life. The biggest thing my dad ever did for me was
to disappear.
So you think there was some sort of foul play?
Absolutely was.
It's really interesting. I mean, you can see where he gets his conspiratorial mind from. I mean, he's definitely very suspicious of his father's death. And honestly, I would be too. The largest search in history up until that point. They never found anything. So Nick Begich Jr. also claims that in 1994, he got his Doctor of Medicine honoris causa for independent work in health and political science. Honoris causa means the degree was awarded without an examination, which sometimes means it's an honorary degree. And Nick got that doctorate from the Open International University for Complementary Medicines in Colombo, Sri Lanka. It's a university that's unrecognized in Sri Lanka and literally anywhere else. In other words, pretty much a fake degree from a fake university or diploma mill. But Nick Begich claims that when HAARP's radio waves punch a hole through the ionosphere, it creates a change in jet streams that create unpredictable reactions and weather patterns on Earth. And that's how all those natural disasters are created. And he said that HAARP can control minds by changing a person's mental function. He says that he knows the government is trying to change the way people think with this technology. But then he also says that he doesn't know for sure that they've used the technology to do that yet. Just that they can, and given what we know about the government, they probably have. So it's up to you whether or not he's making consistent statements here.
Has the capability of controlling minds.
It has the ability of affecting the frequency following response, which is where the brain locks onto an external signal, begins to mirror it, and brain chemistry changes.
So even simpler than that is HAARP can control minds.
Absolutely can control in the sense of changing a mental function.
Do we have any evidence that HAARP or any other government agency is actively right now trying to change the way people think?
Yes, I think we do.
You think we do or you know we do?
I know we do. This technology is possible with this instrument, and the only question is have they done it?
But you don't know that they have.
Nope, couldn't answer that, never have. Can they? Yes. Would they? Yes. What do I know about government? I know government, when they have the capability, they'll utilize it. And they have utilized this technology in a lot of other areas.
That was a ride.
Yeah, definitely makes you think. Definitely makes you think. But in 2015, Nick Begich Jr. spoke at the Covert Harassment Conference. And the conference wanted to bring awareness to targeted individuals who are victims of thought reading and thought control technologies, directed energy weapons, and gang stalking, or AKA organized stalking. According to the conference, this gang stalking is carried out using electromagnetic weapons that can change human behavior, thoughts, and emotions. In other words, mind control. And these devices can apparently be used for torturing and or killing at the speed of light without leaving any evidence. Gang stalking delusions are very serious and usually a symptom of psychotic delusional paranoid disorder. You don't need to have one of these disorders to have the delusion, but it is a delusion, and it has even led to some serious crimes. Gang stalking is a psychological delusion in which the sufferer believes that they are being secretly harassed by a group of stalkers employed by some agency or group that wants to harm them, usually the government. Targeted individuals, or TIs, often complain that they are being surveilled and mind-controlled by these gang stalkers, or that their thoughts are being read, or they're being sent unwanted telepathic messages. And sadly, there have been people out there who have tried to take advantage of these TIs, like this business, who at one point sold a device on Amazon called the Q-Wave Defender, defense for targeted individuals from psychotronic and psychic attacks. It looked like it was about $300. But in the actual Amazon description, it says, protects mind and body from ELF, HAARP, implants, microwave, V2K, and psychic attacks. Converts electronic and psychic attacks to positive energy. Man, wouldn't it be nice for us all to have one of those if they worked? So Nick Begich Jr. is really the one who kind of leads the whole HAARP conspiracy, and he wrote a book, or co-wrote a book, on the whole topic. And in it, he claims that HAARP is being used by the U.S. government as a mind control and weather manipulation technology. Nick has made over $1 million from his HAARP book alone, and he's written a lot of other books, and he makes his living writing books about conspiracy theories and alternative medicine. And like we said before, his son is running for Congress, and he actually makes tens of thousands of years from his share of the company.
Yes, I've been.
Have you been inside?
I've not been in the facility, no.
They're having an open house today.
Yeah, they have them every couple of years.
How come you didn't go?
What am I going to see?
See, the thing that's strange to me is you're not going to lose knowledge if you go into the HAARP facility. You might not gain anything, but isn't it of interest? You're so damn close to it.
There's nothing there that I need to see. It's in their technical specifications on what they built, and the rest is, what is it?
Alex Jones talks to the president. President Trump mentioned during the campaign the JFK assassination conspiracy. Are we in a moment where conspiracy theorists are being heard more than they were in the past?
I would say contrarians are being heard more than they have ever been heard in the past, and I would not say conspiracy theorists. I would say the establishment is not being heard in the same way they were, because they own both parties. And the truth is, the American character that you and I feel we're supposed to represent is not represented in our government anymore. And that's why the Donald Trumps are rising. That's why people who don't fit the norm are rising, because people are sick and tired of being fed like mushrooms, something that other people call fertilizer, and we don't call that anymore. You know?
Very interesting. So he clearly doesn't like to be called a conspiracy theorist, and but it's interesting. Contrarian is what he called himself. So he's a very interesting fella, honestly. I have a lot of thoughts about him, but I will give some of those here at the end. But let's keep going here. So Harp has had some stuff to say in response to all these conspiracy theories, and here are some of the answers that they have to people's lingering questions. Harp scientists have claimed that radio waves, which they use the antennas to send into the ionosphere, cannot manipulate the weather or cause weather events. Their experiments happen in the ionosphere. Solar flares and solar winds can cause powerful electromagnetic storms in the ionosphere, but those don't affect weather or Earth, so Harp can't either. Think of the Northern Lights. It's an extremely powerful electromagnetic storm, but clearly those don't affect the weather. Plus, the radio waves Harp uses do not affect the troposphere or the stratosphere, and those are the two levels of atmosphere where weather occurs. So if the waves have no effect on those levels, then there's no way they can control the weather using radio waves. The waves can't interact with clouds, so there's no way to create precipitation like in cloud seeding. One of the more bizarre rumors about Harp is that it can make caribou walk backwards with its radio waves. And of course, they've denied that that isn't true. As the rumor goes, one day in the small town of Glen Allen, Alaska, the caribou randomly started walking backwards. One of these alleged witnesses called the Anchorage Daily News and said it was caused by Harp mind control. But even Nick Begich doesn't think that this is true. He said that the antennas weren't firing at the time of this alleged incident. A lot of conspiracy theories, though, point to a quote from David Walker, who was a Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Science, Technology, and Engineering. When Harp was planning on closing in 2014, he told a Senate committee that we're moving on to other ways of managing the ionosphere, which the Harp was really designed to do, to inject energy into the ionosphere to be able to actually control it. So some people took that quote as saying as Harp can control the ionosphere, but is that really what David was saying? Harp can control a very tiny part of the ionosphere for their experiments, but that doesn't mean that they can control the entire ionosphere. And of course, Harp can't be used to control people's minds using ELF waves. The ELF waves generated by Harp were still weak enough that submarines would need some sensitive equipment to detect them. So unless a person was actually floating around in the ionosphere at more than 62 miles high at the specific spot Harp was heating, they were never in any danger. So it just puts into perspective like how small of a point Harp is actually affecting in the ionosphere. So circling back to the clip of the woman who worked at Harp playing some of the voicemails they get from conspiracy theorists out there, obviously promoting this and actively saying that this is in fact what's happening, doesn't end well in many cases. In fact, in 2016, 2 men from Georgia were busted in an attempt to attack Harp. They were arrested with AR-15 military-style assault rifles, 4 Glock handguns, body armor, a rifle, more than 2,000 rounds of ammo. The 2 men were planning on attacking the facility because they claimed Harp manipulates the weather, controls minds, and even traps the souls of people. And they were also arrested for dealing meth and marijuana. So that kind of leads us to our conclusion here of like, what do we think? I think a lot of people are skeptical and just flat out say this one's debunked because Harp has been very transparent in at least what equipment that they have there. And as far as, beyond the point that the military was using it for their experiments, what they've been doing there. And they've even opened up their facility to the public many times. I mean, you saw some clips from open houses that they have. So if Harp was in fact still doing any sort of top secret military projects or crazy experimentation on the weather or mines, you think they would still be letting people come in and visit? Probably not. I mean, even since the beginning, Harp has had their address on their website with directions on how to get to the facility. They also had an entire photo galleries with pictures of this top secret antenna array in their facilities, which, I mean, you could probably get a drone close enough to this facility to be able to see the whole thing. I mean, it's, I highly doubt they have like weapons to shoot anything down over it. If you were to try to fly over it and see what's going on there, it's honestly kind of crazy to me that they spent $290 million plus on it. And then when they were done, when the military was done doing their experiments, that they just let the university take over the facility in 2015. I mean, you would think that when the military was done with it, that they would either destroy it or, still have it under heavy guard if it was used for mind control experiments and things like that. But yeah, I mean, it seems like I get why people think the things that they do. I mean, with conspiracy theories, it's difficult because there are things that raise questions. Oftentimes, the official narrative sometimes lays out one set of events, but then the more you dig into it, you start realizing that there could be holes in that story. And with Harp, though, I think it's one of those that has a pretty concrete story. I mean, it's from start to finish, it seems to have been a very, very transparent project. Obviously, we don't know exactly what DARPA was trying to do. And based on other projects that DARPA has been involved in, and even other projects that we've talked about here on the show, I mean, talk about the Montauk project and things like that. The military has been interested in developing new weapons that they could use in war or to take out their enemies that involve being able to take over people's minds or weather modification. I mean, it makes sense, right? It makes sense that they'd want to have a leg up on the rest of the world and have a weapon that could do something like that. But obviously, again, there's a treaty that a bunch of countries signed as well. But again, we don't know what Russia or China or any other countries out there, what kind of programs that they have and what types of experiments that they're doing. And it's been shown in history over and over again that there have been, MK Ultra, that project, was all about mind control. So I don't put it past the military to have tried to experiment before with these types of things. Did they do it with Harp? I don't think we'll ever know because, none of us were a part of these projects when the military was running Harp. There is an episode of an old show that Joe Rogan did actually called Joe Rogan Questions Everything. And he spends an episode kind of going over the whole Harp conspiracy. And in the episode, there's a man that he interviews that claims to be a whistleblower for the Haarp Program when it was under, sort of military ownership at the time. And that individual claimed that they were doing, weather modification with Harp and things like that. So it's people like that that sometimes propel the theory forward. And I think Joe Rogan was not buying that at all. And honestly, I wasn't buying it either. The guy seemed like a total wacko, just trying to get his 5 minutes of fame. But I see how these theories continue to go on because again, we don't understand this technology. For one, we don't understand how this all works. So to the common person, it can very easily seem like they're doing something nefarious, or there's these top secret programs that are doing stuff without our knowledge, and it's so easy to have this mistrust in the government these days, I guess. And it's sad that that's where it's at, but it's just kind of the reality of things. So I don't know. For me, I think Nick Begich is pretty interesting. I think some of his points I kind of can see where, you might have a few more questions. And has there been a lot of transparency in what the military was actually doing with Harp? As far as what I could find, I didn't really see anything, other than they're just testing the ionosphere. But what purposes were they testing the ionosphere for? Military operations? I don't know. Or even going back to Bernard Eastland and the patents that he took out when Harp was first being built and everything, I can see that maybe at the very beginning they were trying to test out Harp and see what capabilities it had, and they eventually realized that in order to achieve the functionality that they were looking for, that they would have to make this thing a whole lot larger, and they'd probably have to have these types of arrays of antennas all over the place in order to be able to pinpoint any place around the world or wherever they needed to use these mind control weapons or weather modifying or manipulating weapons in the future. So I think they just kind of realized that this is a better testing experiment facility to do small experiments on the ionosphere and see how it reacts. And again, the ionosphere is very important to to Earth and to communications here on Earth. So it makes sense. Ultimately, it makes sense what they're doing in my eyes. But again, there are definitely some questions that are raised, and I think Nick's got some valid points. But then again, I think, you can go overboard with it pretty easily. So I don't know. HARP is a very interesting thing, and if I ever get a chance to go up to Alaska, I'd love to at least go drive by it and check it out, because it looks really cool to just look at. But yeah, I want to know what you think about HARP. Do you believe the conspiracy theories about it, or do you think it's just a place where scientists are doing experiments in the ionosphere in little pinpoint, little tiny areas, or are they using it for other purposes? But yeah, let us know in the comments. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap up today's episode there. Thanks again for joining me for another episode of Mile Higher Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this one. I know it was probably a little different not having another voice in here. So hopefully I didn't lull any of you to sleep. I know some of you sleep to my other podcasts. Well, one of them is a sleep podcast, I guess. But hopefully you're still awake and with me and you found this interesting. And I will see you guys next time. And until then, keep taking your mind a mile higher.